Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about power in relationships, we're not talking about domination, control, or one person being better than the other. We're talking about influence. Influence is who sets the pace, who dictates the tone, and who ultimately feels in control of the emotional climate. With someone who leans avoidant, their default way of keeping that power is by creating distance. They keep you at arm's length. They stay vague, slow to respond, or emotionally unavailable, because it helps them feel safe. And when you're chasing them, when you're doing all the work to keep the connection alive, they're the ones holding the power. The moment you stop caring in the same way, the moment you stop running after them with constant reassurance, something very real happens. The power shifts. They no longer have that same safety net of knowing you'll always bridge the gap for them. You're no longer filling the silence with your effort. And what's so important here is that power doesn't shift because you force it or demand it. It shifts because you withdrew the energy that was fueling their dynamic. They had the upper hand only because you kept supplying it. Think about it like tug of war. As long as you're gripping the rope and pulling with all your strength, the other person feels the tension. They know you're invested. They know you won't let go. But the second you release your grip, everything changes. They don't feel that same pull anymore. And avoidants are very tuned into that pull. When you stop caring, you've let go of the rope, and now they're left with the slack. That shift can be shocking because it interrupts the pattern they've grown comfortable with. Power in relationships isn't about manipulation. It's about balance, and balance shows up when you stop overextending yourself. Avoidants often operate under the assumption that you'll keep chasing because that's what keeps their distance intact. But when you step back, you're essentially saying, I'm not here to manage both sides of this relationship anymore. And that's a powerful move because it disrupts the rhythm. You're not punishing them. You're just no longer playing the game of imbalance. This shift in power doesn't mean you suddenly control them either. It means you control yourself. And that's the key. Avoidants struggle with closeness because it feels overwhelming. But when you pull your energy inward, when you invest in your own space, in your own peace, you're no longer at the mercy of their avoidance. That independence is powerful because it signals that your happiness is not dependent on their availability. That's a very different kind of strength than trying to pull someone closer who doesn't want to be close. And here's the part people don't always realize. When you stop caring in that over-invested way, it actually draws more respect. Power isn't about being louder, needier, or more demanding. Power is being able to say, I'm fine on my own. When you stop reacting to distance, you're showing emotional self-control. And that self-control is often the very thing that makes an avoidant sit up and pay attention. They may not say it out loud, but they feel the absence of your energy. They notice the power has shifted because you're not available in the same way anymore. So when we say the power shifts, it's not about flipping the script and suddenly making them chase you out of revenge. It's about you reclaiming your influence over your own emotions. The power comes from no longer letting their avoidance dictate how you feel about yourself. That's the real shift. The control is no longer in their distance. The control is now in your decision to stop caring more than you should. And that kind of balance creates a ripple effect that changes everything in the relationship dynamic. Avoidants thrive on predictability when it comes to how others engage with them. They expect that if they pull away, you'll lean in. If they go silent, you'll break the silence. That pattern becomes a comfort zone, even if it frustrates you. But when you stop caring in the way you used to, when you stop reacting, stop chasing, and stop filling every gap, they notice the change creates curiosity, because now you're not doing what they've always counted on you to do. That absence of reaction is louder than any words you could say. Curiosity is a powerful force because it unsettles the brain. Human beings are wired to seek patterns and to predict outcomes. Avoidants rely on knowing the script of your behavior. Distance equals pursuit. When you don't follow that script anymore, it creates an interruption in their expectations. That interruption makes them wonder, why isn't this person reacting like before? And in that moment, their attention shifts toward you in a way it didn't before. The very act of not caring creates a ripple of curiosity that wasn't there when you were overinvesting. Think of it like watching your favorite TV show. You get used to the rhythm of the story. You know the character arcs, the twists, the type of endings they usually get. But what if suddenly the story broke that rhythm? What if the episode ended in a way you never saw coming? You'd be glued to the screen trying to figure out what just happened. That's exactly what happens in the mind of an avoidant. When the dynamic changes, they're drawn to the unexpected, not because they suddenly crave closeness, but because your unpredictability makes them curious. The curiosity trigger doesn't come from anger or drama. It comes from calm detachment. When you stop explaining, stop over-communicating, and stop trying to solve every distance they create, you project stability. That stability stands out. Avoidants may not chase outright, but their minds will wander to you more often. They might test the waters with small interactions, or they may simply start paying closer attention to your energy. The point is, your lack of pursuit interrupts the pattern in a way that sparks their curiosity about what shifted in you. And here's something that often surprises people. Curiosity from an avoidant doesn't always look like open questions or deep conversations. It may come out subtly. Maybe they initiate contact more than before. Maybe they ask where you've been. Or maybe they hover quietly observing. But the root of it is the same. They feel drawn to figure out why you've stopped giving them the kind of attention they were used to. In other words, your indifference stands out more than your effort ever did. This curiosity can be uncomfortable for them because it challenges their sense of control. Avoidance often feels safest when they know they can predict others' behavior. When they can't, it stirs something beneath the surface. They may not label it as fear or insecurity, but the curiosity itself is a signal that their emotional comfort zone has been disrupted. And in that disruption, they're forced to see you in a new light, less as someone who endlessly provides validation, and more as someone with their own gravity. The curiosity trigger works because it flips the focus. Instead of you wondering constantly about their every move, now they're wondering about yours. And that shift creates space for a different kind of interaction. You're no longer in the position of chasing, explaining, or proving your worth. Your calm detachment makes them curious, and curiosity is the first step toward awareness. Whether they act on it or not, the seed has been planted, and that seed can grow in directions they didn't expect. Avoidants build their entire comfort zone around the idea of emotional distance. Distance gives them control. It gives them safety, and it gives them a sense of predictability. When you're the one always reaching across that distance, it reassures them. They don't have to face their discomfort with intimacy because you're doing all the work to keep the connection intact. But when you stop caring in that same way, when you stop pushing against their walls, something disrupts that balance. Suddenly, the emotional climate they've relied on doesn't feel as steady anymore. This disruption is not about drama or conflict. It's about silence. It's about the absence of the familiar. They're used to you reacting, reaching, and proving your care in ways that allow them to stay withdrawn without losing the relationship. When that stops, it shakes up their internal framework. The safety they once felt in controlling the distance becomes uncertain. They're left with a gap they didn't expect, and that gap forces them to feel emotions they've been trying to avoid. Think about it like walking into a room where there's always been background music. The hum of the sound is so constant that you don't even notice it anymore. But the second the music stops, the silence feels loud, almost unsettling. That's what happens in the avoidance, emotional world, when you stop caring the way you used to. The quiet is disrupted. The absence of pursuit creates a space that forces them to feel the very tension they were trying to avoid by keeping distance. And here's the important part. Disruption doesn't necessarily mean they'll admit it out loud. Avoidants are masters of internalizing. They may act as if nothing has changed, but beneath the surface, they feel the shift. They may feel irritation, confusion, or even anxiety, because the predictable cycle has been broken. Emotional disruption shows up in subtle ways. Restlessness, sudden curiosity, or unexpected attempts to reconnect. It's not always obvious, but it's there. The reason this disruption matters so much is because it removes the cushion of certainty they've been relying on. For an avoidance, certainty comes from knowing you'll always be the one to close the gap. When you step back, you introduce uncertainty into their world. And uncertainty is uncomfortable even for someone who prefers distance. That discomfort can be a powerful catalyst for awareness, because it makes them realize that avoidance isn't a foolproof shield. Your change in behavior proves that distance comes with consequences. This emotional disruption also shifts the weight of responsibility. Before, the avoidant could distance themselves without risk, because they trusted you to keep the connection alive. Now, if they want the relationship to survive, they may have to face the uncomfortable reality of effort. That realization alone is disruptive. It challenges their long-held habit of using avoidance as a tool for safety. The disruption doesn't guarantee they'll step forward, but it ensures they can no longer ignore the imbalance. The beauty of this disruption is that it re-enters you in your own power. You're no longer locked into the emotional cycle of push and pull. Instead, you're creating space for them to confront their own avoidance. And whether they step into that space or not, the disruption has already done its work. It's cracked the comfort zone, unsettled the predictable pattern, and introduced emotions they didn't plan on feeling. That's the moment where the avoidant realizes something is different, and it begins to shift the entire dynamic. Respect in relationships isn't built from how much you give, how much you sacrifice, or how hard you work to hold everything together. Respect is built when boundaries are clear, when self-worth is evident, and when both people understand that connection is a choice, not an obligation. With an avoidant, respect is often delayed, because as long as you're the one doing the chasing, they see you as predictable. They don't have to stretch themselves, because they know you'll stretch for both of you. The moment you stop caring in that over-invested way, you send a new message. That message is, I respect myself enough not to overextend anymore. Avoidants may resist intimacy, but they also notice strength. When you stop reacting emotionally to every withdrawal, you show them that you're not dependent on their approval to feel okay. That independence commands respect, because it communicates stability. Stability is something avoidants crave deep down, but struggle to create for themselves. When you model it by not over-pursuing, you quietly shift their perception. They no longer see you as the one endlessly trying to close the gap, but as someone grounded enough to stand on their own. Think about how respect works in any other area of life. You respect the colleague who stands firm in meetings, not the one who always backs down. You respect the friend who sets boundaries and keeps their word, not the one who cancels plans every time you call. Respect is born from consistency and strength. In relationships with avoidance, that strength looks like calm detachment, not coldness, not bitterness, but the ability to remain centered when they pull away. That composure makes an impression because it shows you're not swayed by every emotional shift. Respect also comes from scarcity. When your attention is constant, it's taken for granted. But when you stop caring in that overactive way, your energy becomes selective. You're no longer handing out reassurance, like it costs nothing. That shift in availability naturally creates respect, because people tend to value what isn't guaranteed. For avoidants, who often expect pursuit, your decision to stop overgiving forces them to view your presence differently. They realize your attention isn't a bottomless resource. It's something that has to be earned. This respect doesn't mean they'll suddenly change overnight, but it does alter the way they perceive you. Instead of being the predictable giver, you become the steady presence, who doesn't beg for closeness. And that steadiness challenges their assumption. It tells them you're not afraid of their distance, and you're not defined by their silence. That message is powerful because it separates your worth from their behavior. They begin to see you not as someone who needs them, but as someone who chooses them, and that distinction commands respect in a way that chasing never could. Respect also grows because your independence removes pressure. When you stop caring in that overextended way, you release them from the role of being responsible for your happiness. That release, ironically, makes space for respect to grow. Avoidance often feels suffocated by expectation, but when they see you are okay without their constant presence, they feel freer, and freedom often breeds respect, because it removes the fear of being trapped. They don't feel forced to show up. They see that showing up is a choice,
The respect factor is about more than just how they view you. It's also about how you view yourself. When you stop chasing, you prove to yourself that your self-worth isn't tied to their availability. That internal respect radiates outward, and people respond to it. For avoidants, who often underestimate how strong their partner really is, this change is eye-opening. They begin to respect not just your boundaries, but also your ability to thrive without constant validation. That shift in perception is one of the most powerful outcomes of letting go of the need to care more than you should. When you stop caring in that over-invested way, what you're really doing is creating a window for growth. Growth doesn't happen when one person is constantly carrying the weight for both. Growth happens when space enters the relationship, space for awareness, for reflection, and for someone with avoidant tendencies, that space is uncomfortable at first, but it's also where growth becomes possible, because without the constant cushion of your pursuit, they are left to face the reality of their own behavior and what it means for the connection. That growth window isn't just for them though, it's for you too. By pulling back your energy, you give yourself the chance to reevaluate what you want, what you need, and what you're no longer willing to tolerate. So often when you're the one always bridging the gap, your own needs fall to the background. You're too busy managing the dynamic to check in with yourself. But when you step back, the silence creates clarity. You see the relationship not through the lens of hope or fear, but through the lens of reality. That clarity is the beginning of your growth. For the avoidant, the growth window looks different. They may feel unsettled, confused, or even defensive at first. But the absence of your usual care interrupts their autopilot. They're confronted with the fact that if they want closeness, they may have to meet you halfway. That realization can spark self-reflection, even if it's uncomfortable. And growth almost always begins in discomfort. By not overing, you've given them the opportunity to confront their own avoidance, instead of escaping it. Whether they rise to that challenge or not, the window is open. Think of growth like a muscle. It doesn't develop when everything feels easy and comfortable. It develops under resistance, under tension, when the familiar patterns break down. Avoidants don't grow by staying in their comfort zone of distance. They grow when the old dynamic no longer works. When silence feels heavier than closeness, and when they're invited, not forced, to show up differently. By stepping back, you've introduced that resistance. You've made space for growth by refusing to overcompensate. The growth window also teaches balance. When you no longer chase, the avoidant has the chance to test what it feels like to step forward. For some, that step may be small, a text, a call, or an effort they wouldn't normally make. For others, it might be bigger, like opening up emotionally in ways they avoided before. The point isn't the size of the step, but the fact that space has been created for it to happen. Without your constant pursuit, the relationship shifts into a new rhythm, where growth becomes possible for both sides. This window matters because it separates real connection from dependence. When you stop caring more than is healthy, you're no longer holding the relationship together by force. What remains is what's genuine. If the avoidant chooses to grow, it comes from their decision, not your pressure. And if they don't, your growth is still happening because you've reclaimed your energy. Either way, the window ensures progress toward a stronger partnership, or toward the strength to move on. That progress is a win for you. No matter the outcome ultimately, the growth window is about opportunity. It's the opportunity for the avoidant to notice the cost of their distance, and the opportunity for you to see your worth outside of the chase. It's the opportunity to break cycles that kept both of you stuck. And it's the opportunity to build a relationship where respect, curiosity, and balance are possible. Growth doesn't come easy, but when you stop overaying, you open the door for it in ways that nothing else